There is a very important change coming to real estate closings starting March 1st, 2026. Under a new rule issued by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, title companies will need to report certain information to the Treasury Department for certain transactions. FinCEN is a bureau of the United States Department of the Treasury. The transactions that must be reported are those where A. The buyer is an entity, such as an LLC or a corporation, or if the buyer is a trust, and B. The buyer is either paying cash or using a private lender. If the transaction meets those requirements, then the title company must gather information from the buyer and seller and report it to FinCEN regardless of the purchase price. The main categories of the reportable information includes names and personal information about the individuals who own 25% or more of the entity and the source of funds, typically the bank account information that the buyer is using to fund the purchase. The purpose of reporting this information is so FinCEN can identify, investigate, and discourage cases of money laundering. Let's take a deeper look at the types of transactions that are reportable to FinCEN. The first criterion is the type of property. The rule applies to 1 to 4 unit residential properties. Properties with 5 or more units are exempt. The definition of residential property is broad and includes mixed-use properties that contain a residential component, as well as vacant land if the buyer intends to build a residence. The second criteria is the buyer must be an entity or a trust. The most common are LLCs and corporations. Residential transactions with a buyer that is an entity or trust are reportable regardless of the purchase price. Even quitclaim deeds with zero consideration are reportable if they meet the criteria. The third criterion is how the purchase is funded. The buyer must be paying cash or using a private lender. Private lenders can include hard money lenders or family members. Now let's discuss what Landtrust Title will be doing to make sure that these transactions close on time and in accordance with the FinCEN rule. First, shortly after receiving the title order, we will determine whether the transaction is reportable. If it is, we will notify the parties and their attorneys and send an email containing a secure link to the required data collection forms. The seller and the buyer will each receive their own data collection form. The seller's form asks whether an exemption applies to the reporting requirement. Common exemptions include transfers pursuant to a divorce decree or judicial order. This is why it's important for clients to work with an experienced real estate attorney who can identify applicable exemptions. The buyer's form collects information regarding the beneficial owners of the entity or trust, as well as account information for the source of funds. Once Landtrust has received both completed forms, we will notify the parties that we have the required FinCEN information and are ready to proceed with closing. Landtrust will then submit the reportable information to FinCEN shortly after the closing. There are a few things to be aware of that will help the closing process go smoothly. If you know that your client is going to take title as an entity or a trust and that they are not using a traditional institutional lender, then please make them aware of this requirement early on in the process so that the extra paperwork is not a surprise to them. If the buyer makes a last-minute change, like taking title in a trust instead of individually, they need to be aware that the title company must receive the required documentation quickly before the closing can proceed. With all of the complexity involved in real estate closings in Illinois, it is more important than ever to work with a reputable title company and an experienced real estate attorney that knows all of the intricacies of real estate closings in Illinois. If you have any questions about any part of the process, please reach out and we will be more than happy to help make your transaction a smooth one.